I'm Betsy Sweet, your host this week for Maine Challenge. This week, we'll talk with those young people who are canvassing your doors all election season. Good morning and welcome to the Maine Challenge. This month, I'm Betsy Sweet. I am your host for the Maine Challenge this morning. And this month, we are looking back on what happened in November. We're calling it Elections Reflections because we want to see what happened, what worked, how did we get there, and where do we go from here. So this month, we'll be talking to a number of people who were involved in the elections, what their perspectives are, and what they make of what happened in November. I am thrilled this morning to have with us three wonderful young people who canvassed door to door on behalf of the Democrats in the election, and they'll tell us a little bit more about that. But they're the ones who knocked on your door in the rain and the dark and the cold to really talk with you about where voters thought they were, what issues they cared about. So we wanted to get some behind the scenes insight on what happened, what they found at the doors, what worked, what didn't work. So I am thrilled to welcome today Kayla Johnson, who is from Farmingdale, and Madeline Chamberlain. And Madeline, hi, welcome to you. And then Colin Fagan, welcome to the three of you. I am so happy to have you all here. It's great to see you this morning. So thanks for being here. And first, before I ask my first question, let me just say from the bottom of my heart, thank you. Thank you for doing this work. I have done it a lot. And it is hard work. There are days I know where you just think, oh my God, I can't get up and do this one more time. So I know it was hard. And we know statistically that people who have been spoken to personally have a much higher chance of thinking about the election, obviously beforehand, but also a much higher chance of voting. And so thank you for doing this work. So Kayla, let me start with you. Tell us a little bit about just sort of what you were doing, what your mission was, what it was like. Just tell us a little bit about what your purpose was in doing this canvassing.
Yeah, so we often just go out. We would start our day at Capitol Park outside, and we would get our turf, which is just a list of names that we'd be going to their house and knocking on their door to see if they were home. And a lot of what we were doing is just having conversations with folks about what really mattered to them this election cycle and why they would be turning out to vote. The day-to-day life could consist of just 5 conversations because there's a lot of people just out and about, or you can talk to up to like 10 to 15 people depending on if it was a weekday or a weekend. But the conversations range from 5 minutes to 40 minutes. So it really depended on the person and what they really wanted to talk about that day.
Yeah. So Colin, give me a little bit about what kinds of people were you targeting? Were you targeting likely voters, unlikely voters? What was your turf composed of?
Great question. Thank you for asking. But to be frank, we were targeting almost everyone. Even the folks who have voted democratically in the past, for blue, and but we were also targeting folks that voted red in the last election because we wanted to try to sway them. And the thing with canvassing, the whole purpose of it is to be informative and also help folks become more aware of some of the issues that we talk about and listen to. But being able to be more personable, we can hear like what their opinions are and also offer both of our perspectives. So it's great to be able to kind of get a broad range of all the folks, whether you're on the left or the right or right down the middle.
Yeah. And so Madeline, this must have been pretty challenging during COVID. Did you find that people were reluctant to open their doors or they wanted to stay 10 feet away? Or I know you were all masked. So how was that?
I would say it's probably one of the safest COVID jobs, actually. I was alone in my car or I was at someone's door, kind of at my distance that I wanted to be, which was at least 6 feet, just to be sure. So that was very controllable by us, thankfully. So there was nothing that felt unsafe or anything. Masks, of course, I don't think people were really reticent to open the door because of COVID. Like I did this in 2018, and I'd say that the contact rate wasn't drastically different as you might have thought. People invited me in, even we weren't allowed to go in, of course, but no, I think it was very safe. I felt very secure, and it was very at our discretion and safety. So yeah.
Yeah, and maybe people were excited to have someone to come visit.
Gosh, I think so. Yeah,
so
if you know, it's lonely up in CD2, you never know. So yeah, definitely feel that.
Yeah. So Madeline, you said this was you did it also in 2018. So what draws you to canvassing? Like, what do you, obviously you did it again, and I know part of it is because you know it's necessary, and I'm so grateful, but maybe you even like it a little bit. What is it that draws you to it?
Yeah, so I came at it in 2018 as a paid canvasser, like totally blind. I had made phone calls for Bernie Sanders in 2016, but it's totally different being in front of someone in person, and especially in my own state. That was really special because I was raised in Maine, obviously. So I do enjoy it. You know, it sounds crazy, like talking to random people about their political views during their workday or whatever, but you have just crazy range of conversations that I really enjoyed, and it did bring me back. I would say that primary voters are very different than general election voters, so that was a drastically different experience, and you know, there was a lot of eyes on our state this time that wasn't there last time, so that did kind of make it a little different. But I do enjoy it. I enjoy talking to Mainers.
Yeah, no. Well, let's talk about some of those conversations. So Kayla, for you, talk about a little bit about how much of what you were doing was convincing people to get out and vote, and how much was persuasion, and what did you find that was well, first of all, what were the issues that people were thinking about? What did you find? Was there a theme at all?
Yeah, so there was actually a few themes that I really noticed this election cycle compared to previous ones. One was healthcare, and that was something that I also related to a lot. My mother doesn't have insurance, and I'm on Maine Care, and I met a lot of folks who were struggling to either pay their deductibles or even get insurance, and so that was just a common theme across the board in age groups. The other thing that was very interesting was a lot of people were commenting on the negative ads on both sides for both parties. And that was something that was kind of disappointing, especially as a canvasser, because my job is to inform people and talk about really salient issues, when a lot of these ads weren't really salient actually on public policy in the ways that would help Mainers. So that was a struggle, but it was also an opportunity to kind of pivot away from that negative environment and make it more positive of how policy can impact just average Mainers.
Okay, great. And Colin, did you find that those were some of the issues that you had too?
Yes, healthcare was definitely a big issue as well, along with care for senior folks, because Maine is known as one of those states with a lot of older folks. And we need to be there for them and provide incentives that will make their retirement easier. And one of those things that I've heard that would be helpful to a lot of senior folks would be tax relief, and being able to afford their prescription medication while at the same time just affording basic living costs, housing, transportation, and food and groceries. Part of that, is due to the expensive name brand prescription medications we had. And one of the things that stood out to me that Sarah Gideon offered as House Speaker, that she pushed the bill to allow cheaper generic prescription medication to be made available, not only just to seniors, but to all folks in Maine.
Yeah. So prescription drugs and taking care of seniors. So Madeline, one of the things that I heard, just not canvassing, but just talking to people, was that, like, let's take the issue of prescription drugs, right? I think uniformly everyone thinks that big pharma is awful, and that they're making a gazillion dollars off of us, off of sick people and older people, and it's terrible. And yet we saw ads from Susan Collins saying, I did prescription drugs and I made them cheaper. And then Sarah Gideon said, I made them cheaper. And then they both lobbed, but you didn't and you didn't. So I had a woman, a friend of mine who's not particularly political, who said, I don't know what to think. They both are saying the same thing. So did you run into that at all? And were you able to help people think through that at all?
I did, yeah. And just something I would say is I understand that sentiment. I understand not really being able to distinguish between some more corporate Democrats and a lot of Republicans nowadays. And I think I did run into that a lot in Maine. It's hard when campaigns aren't as policy focused and when you kind of have to canvass for your Democrat from the right, you know, you have to say, oh no, don't worry, like they're not going to pass Medicare for all of this stuff. That is probably the hardest part of canvassing for me is for the Democrats is when I have to defend them on grounds that like they should actually be for, because the majority of Mainers are. What was the percentage of that exit poll? Like, I think it was in the high 60s of supporting Maine. So, yeah, just to sneak that in there because I want to. And thank you, Betsy, for bringing that to the forefront in Maine politics. I know Kayla and I talked about this. We really appreciated that. So, and I'm sure Colin too, all of that. But so yeah, I would say I understand that sentiment. I did run into it, and sometimes it is hard to differentiate just kind of in quick conversation.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. Yeah, go ahead, Kayla.
Oh, and I just like that reminds me of some conversations I had that weren't necessarily my own views, but for example, I had one woman who was very unsure about the presidential race, and she said she liked Trump's policies. And I asked her, what policies do you like? And we began to talk about immigration, and one of the things was about how he's deporting more individuals. Well, if you actually look at the statistics, Obama deported more people in the first 4 years of his term than Trump did. Now, that's not something I personally advocate for, but that's something to know, that it's what he's promising to this group of people is not actually the reality of it. And in fact, he took a zero tolerance stance and is separating just families, where before with at least Obama, it was people who were convicted of a crime who were most likely targeted with these deportations. But at the end of the day, something we don't talk about is Obama deported more people than Trump ever did.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing that I think is a nugget for all of us, and I expect the three of you to answer this because it's like the world question, right? So, as you said, Madeline and Colin, you mentioned it too. So people want policies that healthcare is a big issue, right? We're the only country, I know you all know this, and the viewers all know this. We're the only country in the world, industrialized nation in the world that doesn't provide free healthcare for our people. And, now we call it Medicare for all. I don't care what we call it, but I just think, people want healthcare. They want it to be quality care, and they want it to be cheaper or not pay for it at all. There's tons of people who still aren't insured. So, and I think that's a universal thought across party lines, young and old, and conservative and liberal and Republican and Democrat. And yet, when they go to choose a candidate, it often doesn't reflect the policies that candidate has. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like, how do we bridge that gulf between what people say they want and then the candidates that they vote for who don't stand for what they want? And this idea that we, in politics, and I think that leads us to not ever talking about policy because they don't get it, or they don't make that connection. So, Colin, I wondered if you had any thoughts about, did you experience that? And do you have any thoughts about how we bridge that gulf?
Yeah, so I think that
speak up a little bit too, Colin. A little bit louder.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I feel like that gap widened between us talking about the policies and in what what the politicians are actually going to do. And I think personally, part of that problem was in our senator race, which is very really important, probably one of the most important ones we've had in the past 20 years. And I say that because Senator Susan Collins has been in office since 1997. And mind you, I was born in 96, so practically my whole life. And the thing is, we tend to get comfortable with things, and when things don't change, we sort of forget a lot of the issues that pertain to us. So by bringing in a new candidate, for example, like Sarah Gideon, who offered very pellucid, criteria and situations, and she offered to offer more affordable, prescription medications, like I was saying earlier. But the other thing we have to think about is that a lot of young families have been moving into Maine, and we need to be able to maintain that balance between our senior folks and young families. And young families, of course, need to have that Medicare, to raise their young, and also to expand for their, coverage when they get older. So I think that's one of the issues, that separation, that gap has widened. But so this election has really kind of closed the gap a little bit.
Yeah. Well, so I know that all of you had those instances where you actually persuaded someone to vote differently, and where you actually and I know that, well, just from my own experience, that's like the most rewarding thing, right? Sometimes they say, thank you, and then you have no idea whether you made a difference or you didn't. But I know you have those conversations that are like, yes, I got that person, right? So tell me, share with us a little bit, any story that you have about something that worked. What were some of the conversations that worked?
For me, one of my most memorable conversations was a woman who was a part of a union, and she was reluctantly told me that she was going to vote for Gideon because of that. But she was leaning towards Trump because she's pro-life. And so I really hate the term pro-life because it's, again, consolidated to one policy instead of looking at the systematic problems that exist. A lot of women might not carry a baby to term because it costs thousands of dollars to have a baby in our current hospital system. Not only that, just daycare. We don't have universal daycare like other countries, parental leave. So there's a lot of other issues at play to why a woman might not want to carry to term. And so that's something I talked to her about. As a religious person, she saw that people should be treated as equal. And I kind of pulled that out a bit more and asked her to explain. So the more we talked, by the end of the conversation, she told me she saw the Holy Spirit in Joe Biden and that she was leaning towards him. I saw that she voted on my campus list. So I went back and asked her who she voted for, and she told me she voted for Joe Biden. So It was a very great feeling because she has been hearing this for so long, that pro-life tag, but she never really considered what it actually meant to be pro-life.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's awesome. Congratulations, Kayla. That's awesome. Madeline, how about you? Did you find anything that was particularly useful in persuasion?
Yeah, so I think the easiest candidate to canvass for is Jared Golden in CD2. Like, people just love him across the board. And I got a couple Trump people, like, I tried not to flinch too much when they said Trump Collins, and then I would ask for their representative choice, and they would say, I don't know, like, who's running, and I got to kind of push Jared Golden on his own terms, so that was great up in CD2. And I would just, my last point about him would be to kind of compare the Gideon and Golden races. People crossed ticket to vote for Jared Golden and then against Gideon. So I think that's something that Mainers and the party in Maine have to kind of reconcile with, and maybe take more from Jared. You know, he ran on Medicare for All in 2018. It's a popular policy, even up north, guys. Like, we can do this. So yeah, I'd say just policy for it. And then another thing that was exciting was I got a first-time voter who knew about the presidential race, but I kind of got to fill in the rest of her ballot for her. Like, we were just, she seemed to agree with everything I said. So that was cool to get some information to some 18-year-olds,
Yeah. Colin, how about you? What was working for you?
Yes, this reminded me of a story where I've had a lot of luck connecting with younger families for some reason, but I remember talking to a particular family that was more conservative, that sort of leaned pro-life, and was also towards supporting Trump and Susan Collins. However, when I started talking about education, because I noticed that they had kids, I saw a basketball hoop in the driveway, down the yard. So it was, so I took this opportunity to mention that at the time, Sarah Gideon was pushing for a policy to expand financial education, especially K through 12. And this is something that, as a Maine native, having grown up in Whitefield, Maine, gone to high school at Urshan Academy, and then very happily graduated from University of Maine at Orono. However, K through 12, I did not get the chance to really learn about financial independence. How to learn about manage your checkbooks, investment, and these things are all very important for our future likelihood. And also with this whole COVID situation, our economy has shifted from going to being in person to like brick and mortar to all digital. So more than ever, it's more important for folks to learn how to manage their money. And this created like an opportunity for me to speak to families, and families saw that, you know, they really care about their kids. They want the best for the kids, obviously. And in some ways, I think I was able to persuade them a little bit, maybe not in the president race, certainly in the senator race in Maine. So that's one of the things that stood out for me most, but yeah, thank you.
Wow. Well, that's awesome. And I think a couple of things that I'm taking away from what you're saying is that I believe that we have made a huge mistake in dumbing down elections. You know, this idea that everything should be just what you can put in a 10-second, not even a 30-second ad, but 10 seconds. And, you know, when I was running as both for the Senate race and when I ran as governor, I found that people were so hungry to talk about policy and hungry to talk about the details and say, okay, not just better, you know, freer prescriptions or healthcare, but to say, okay, what does that look like? And I think that we've done a lousy job, quite frankly, of painting a picture of the future that people can see themselves in, right? Because everything's changing. We're scared, right? People are scared. We're all scared. And so when we're scared, what do? We go back to what was. And so 4 years ago, you know, go back to where we were. That was the thing that won. And this time, I think that through people canvassers like you get to do the personal thing where you see, for example, Colin, like you said, you see that they have kids, you know, you see the basketball hoop and the toys on the floor. So you get to be really good at understanding where people are coming from. And I think the reason, and I'd love to hear what you think about this, the reason that canvassing is so important is because people want to believe that they matter. They want to believe that their lives matter, that someone is going to listen to not just the big picture, but like, okay, this is what it's like for me as a single mom with kids and trying to work and no daycare. And now I'm in COVID and I'm trying to work at home and I'm homeschool my kids and you know, like just having someone to listen to them and say yes, and then make that translation into policy. To me, that's what you guys were doing, right?
Definitely. And I think that a focus away from aesthetics and kind of what people think Mainers want to see in a politician aesthetically, like, I think we're past that. There are larger issues than, you know, if you wear LL Bean in the ad or whatever. Like, I think we need policies. We just need white pages of what they're going to do for you. And I think Maine is ripe for a, you know, progressive wing to kind of, you know, have a lot of success.
Yeah, and have some strong policies. Okay,
Yes.
so we're getting, so it goes so fast. But I wanted to ask for each of you, first of all, I want to hear your funniest story. You know, I didn't tell you, I should have started off with saying this, that my first job out of college was canvassing for the Equal Rights Amendment back in 1978. And man, it was the best political education I ever had. I still think about those experiences, but really talking about equality door to door with people in northern New Jersey, which is where I was where I was assigned, it was unbelievable. So, but I have some fabulous, sometime we'll grab a beer and have some talk about our stories. But so what were either the most funny or outrageous stories that you have? Let's start with you, Kaylin. Anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, this was back in June. I didn't know what QAnon was, and I saw like this bunny on a poster that said that, and I was like, maybe that's a candidate. And so I was canvassing for a man, and I go to the door. The man had moved, and a woman who the sign belongs to answered. And as soon as I said who I was with, she was like, "Get your Joe Biden loving blank out off my property." And then she started recording me and following me to the car. And I was just so taken aback because I still didn't understand what that group was yet. And then I see a news article like maybe a week later, and I was like, this all makes sense now. But yeah, it was just a very interesting exposure to that conspiracy group.
Yeah, awesome. Madeline?
Yeah, so I'd say funniest and most outrageous thing was I was in Bath. We were in Bath for a couple of days, and I knocked on a door, and we had a great half-an-hour conversation about, you know, progressivism, how, you know, kind of more on my side of politics, let's say. And then he says, you know what, Lisa Savage is staying in the house next to me. And I was a big fan of her Senate campaign. I talked about her on the doors. rank Lisa first. It was a great campaign. So I actually got to meet her and she gave me some merch. So that was the funniest thing that happened on the job, I would say. But yeah, she's great. And I know you guys did work together. So yeah.
Oh, that's great. Funny. That's awesome. That's awesome. How about you, Colin?
I remember a conversation I had with a woman in area. And, I came up to first knock on his door. And at first, he didn't really want to talk to me. But I think I kind of got to him because we just started talking about things in general, things that were happening now in the general election. And it was funny because we totally just diverged from what I was there for, giving the pitch for Sarah Gideon. But we started talking about the history of, politics in the past. So like we were going back to even Reagan era and Nixon and talking about the war on drugs. And then we started relating that to the opioid crisis here in Maine, which is certainly a very big issue. Wow. It's something that we hope to curb because we want to be able to, have Maine, be able to have those preventative and educational centers for folks that are struggling with that or trying to make a change for themselves. But that conversation really did stand out to me because at the end, he was very, very thoughtful and had wished that we probably could have talked for another 20 minutes because at that point it seemed like we were talking for 40 minutes. And I was like, all right, this is a great conversation, but I definitely need to knock on 50 more doors today.
I got work to do. Okay, so we're rounding up. We have very little time, but I want to do one quick lightning round. So if there's one thing that you learned that you, as a takeaway, that you would like to give advice to the next campaign, to the next effort, what's the advice that, like, okay, really, like 1 second, like what is the takeaway that you have that you would give advice to the next round? Kayla, let's start with you. I'll put you on the spot.
Listen to other people when you're at the doors.
All right, listen. Okay, Madeline.
Mainers want Medicare for all.
Yay, all right. Colin.
Don't take everything personally. Sometimes take it with a grain of salt.
Okay, awesome. Wow. Well, so we could talk for hours and we will continue this conversation. But let me say again, I am so grateful to all of you, the three of you, and so many hundreds of others who did this work, because I think it does matter. We know canvassing matters. We know that people want to be heard. So thank you so much again for the work that you're doing. So thanks to Kayla Johnson. Thanks to Madeline. Oh my God, I'm not good with last names.
Chamberlain, don't worry.
Chamberlain and Colin Fagan, sorry. Thank you so much for being with us. And most importantly, I hope that you all stay in it. We need your voices. We need your enthusiasm. We need all your experience. And if there's anything I can do to help you as you go forward, please let me know. And I know that there's thousands and thousands of Mainers who feel the same way. So thank you for your help in making this one of the most highest turnout elections in the US history, and also one of the most important. So thank you to you. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for tuning into the Maine Challenge. The rest of this month, we will be also doing more election reflections, and we look forward to seeing you then.
Show your support for Maine Challenge and LCTV's programming. We're all about community. Please go to lctv.org to make a contribution. Your support makes us stronger together.